Welcome into the DNVR Rockies podcast, brought to you by Strava Craft Coffee. Remember to use that promo code DNVR20 for new subscribers to get, or new drinkers. I guess you don't subscribe. You could subscribe to Strava Craft Coffee, and you should. DNVR20 gets you 20% off your first purchase. DNVR25, 25% off your second purchase of the CBD-infused, deliciously rich, and potentially life-altering Strava Craft Coffee. I'm your host, Drew Creasman, managing editor of DNVR Rockies. With me, as always, is beat writer Patrick Lyons, and joining us for this one is, of course, the voice of the Colorado Rockies on AT&T Sportsnet and the host of the Drew Goodman podcast, Drew Goodman. Thanks for joining the show.
Always good to be with you guys, man. A lot of stuff finally going on, actual real baseball. So I know you guys want to delve into that today, but good to be with you.
Well, we appreciate it. We know you got a lot going on, but there is also, as you said, there's baseball going on. You know, it seems like we got so very little of it last year. No, it doesn't just seem that. Let me correct.
It's
we
true.
only got 60 baseball games. Is that correct? That wasn't just a fever dream that I had.
It was the 60-game sprint.
Right. And so, you know, with that, and then right into another offseason, just to see a little bit of baseball out there, it's got to be nice to be like, hey, look, sound of the ball hitting the bat, spring training's back in the air again.
Yeah, I'm really excited. We were chatting before we went on air. I'm going to go down for the first time spring training on Tuesday for a week, and we're televising a couple of games on, actually, I think 4 games over the next, between the 10th and the 15th. We'll televise 4 games. So folks will get a look at the 2021 version of the Rockies a little bit. But I'm really excited because March is always one of my favorite months. I've told you guys this before. The weather in Scottsdale is great. There's a great buzz. There's so many. It seems like you walk down the street, and typically in normal times you'd see half of your friends from Colorado because people migrate down there. All the kids are playing baseball down there with the different spring breaks, and it's just a great time. Everybody's relaxed. Players are a little more relaxed, unless of course they're fighting for a job, and everybody's just getting ready for the season. Nobody's lost a game yet, and it is in so many ways my favorite time of year. And I know this year will still be different, but there are some folks at the ball games. I guess up to a couple thousand or so, and I can't wait to get down there next Tuesday. And when we get together on your guys' podcast next week, I can tell you a little bit more about the sights and sounds, but I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, that was an interesting element that we now have this spring is fans of the ballpark. Of course, Coors Field will now have 25% capacity at about 12,500. But even in the early going here at spring training, you actually see people sitting out on the lawn, on the berm, catching foul balls, you know, smattering of applause here and there. Might not be a lot, but it definitely is real. And it definitely feels like, okay, we are getting back to normalcy as a nation, and baseball's getting back to normal as well.
Yeah, it seems like for the most part, you know, we're strongly trending in the right direction, not just from a baseball standpoint, but from a national standpoint, hopefully from a global standpoint as well. But you're right. Even when I'm watching some games, I saw some college baseball last week, watching one of my boys playing, and just, you know, even with a couple hundred people there, it's great, man. You're seeing the right atmosphere. I've seen some other games on television, and I you know, we probably in the past would, you know, mock small crowds, Miami Marlins crowds, right? But now you give anything to have a Miami Marlins type crowd.
You're going 12,000. That's what everyone's
awesome,
trying to.
man.
That's what you're trying to get in the door.
The Montreal Expos are now the gold standard in attendance, you know, when compared with everything going on today's day and age.
I got to tell you, you just reminded me when I first started calling Major League Baseball. I was doing it at the time. It was in the 90s for Fox Sports, Fox Sports Net nationally, and FX, and they had a couple games of the week, if you guys recall, and it seemed like every other week I was sent to Montreal to do a game, and it was awesome. I mean, and when I first broke in with the Rockies, you know, obviously the Expos were still in Montreal, and what a great city. And I've said this, as baseball looks to expand, there's so many worthy cities. I think Nashville would be awesome, and Portland, Oregon's a great city. But man, I hope baseball returns to Montreal. It's an international city, and there's great baseball history. And I know in preseason, the last few years, when Toronto and Montreal play a couple of games against each other, they sell out. I mean, they get 40+ thousand. So I really believe that Montreal will support baseball with the right stadium. But Stade Olympique was no longer the right stadium.
No, it was not. Vlad Guerrero Jr. a couple years ago during one of the exhibitions where the Blue Jays played up there at Olympic Stadium, and the fans were going crazy for the son of Vlad Guerrero, a guy that they knew and loved so much in Montreal. And I'm sure you're following closely the situation in Tampa Bay, because it sounds like it's still a few years off, but Stu Sternberg, the owner of the Rays, has been discussing this idea about starting the season in Tampa for the Rays and then going up to Montreal at parts of the season and creating this sort of X-Rays type team. It's very unique. I think they're kind of dipping their toe in that water, as you said, with expansion kind of coming around the corner. And Montreal may indeed get back and have a major league team at some point soon.
Yeah, I don't know how many cities could pull that off. I think it's a fascinating story / idea, guys, because we all know Tampa historically. I mean, they're in the World Series. With very little, they do a whole lot. And yet, listen, the Trop is. I've done football there. I've done baseball there. The Trop needs to go, but they've struggled from a municipality standpoint to raise the money to build a new stadium. Will the population show up? Is it because it's an older population? Is it who knows all of the reasons? But maybe the right answer is to be a hybrid. And if you're a hybrid, think about the marketing from a product standpoint.
That'd be so fascinating. Yeah.
They're you're a team that literally, it's like the old co-op teams in the minor leagues where I know Jeff Houston, when he was in Burlington, Iowa, they were half Royals and half I believe Cubs or Expos. It wasn't Cubs. It was half Expos, half Royals, I believe, back in the day. And maybe that would work with Tampa being in such a unique situation.
Yeah, that would be really, really interesting. Now I'm just my mind is racing thinking about all of that. There's something very interesting going on right now, by the way, that's a rarity, which is that we're obviously having this conversation with you while a Colorado Rockies game is happening, and we're now getting play-by-play from the comments section, letting us know the Colorado Rockies have tied it back up with a 2-run homer from Casey Golden. I did see in the inning before. We had officially gotten to the point of the game where game day did not know the name of the person who had scored or driven in the run. So they just sent out blank scores. Rockies now down, it was just like fantastic.
Yeah. And if people missed it, Brendan Rodgers hit his first home run of the spring.
Yeah.
In that game, it was an opposite field shot coming after Raimel Tapia hit the first home run of the spring for the Rockies, an opposite field shot. And we're going to talk about this probably ad nauseum for some, but of the intriguing players, the question marks going into 2021, and if the Rockies are to surprise folks, I think they need plenty of good stories. And one of them, hopefully, is Brendan Rodgers, who at one time was one of the top prospects in all of baseball. And he's probably fallen from that stature over the last year or two just because he's had trouble staying on the field. He has only 97 big league at-bats, but he was drafted 3rd overall out of a Florida high school because he projected as a guy that could hit and hit for power eventually and stay in the middle infield somewhere. And this is an extremely important year for Brendan Rodgers. And I think even though he wasn't in the shadow, guys, of Nolan Arenado, because Nolan plays 3rd, Nolan's a longtime established superstar, just, not having maybe the pressure of looking over there and going, oh my goodness, that's Nolan, and it's Charlie in right field, where he feels like more of the same age group. I don't know if there's something to that, but I believe there is. I really believe there is, which could help him relax and seize this opportunity. But it's a big year. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. This is a big year for Brendan Rodgers, so it's good to see him. He threw out another hit earlier in the ball game to drive in a run, so it's good to see him have a solid day down in Scottsdale.
I think that makes sense as far as him having a little less pressure, because there are guys on this team that he's seen in spring training the last few years. He's friends with Ryan McMahon and a few of those other guys that are in that kind of grade, 1 or 2 grades above him. And yet there was never really anybody around him that was a top prospect, 3rd overall pick. Like you said, you had Riley Pint, coming the next year and really kind of not really catching fire. And outside of that, it's been about Brendan Rodgers since he was taken back in 2015. It's been nothing but Brendan Rodgers. And so a lot of pressure can kind of get heaped on a guy, and it doesn't have the opportunity, to hide because maybe other prospects are getting that shine and whatnot. And you're right. So now with kind of Nolan being gone, I don't necessarily think Rodgers is, the next star of the team immediately right now, but now he's got some room to say, look, I'm not a prospect anymore. And I also don't necessarily have to live up to the expectations of this other superstar guy at third base. So he can really start to, come into his own, much like a lot of these young guys on the team this year.
No, I think that's a point well taken. And we always talk about a player maturing into whatever they will be at the big league level. And generally, we're using that term to reference the physical maturation, stronger, more explosive, how they understand their swing, how they understand and adapt to big league pitching. But there's a component we rarely talk about, and that is just truly maturing from an emotional standpoint, going from a 19, 20, 21-year-old young man to a 23, 24-year-old, still young man, but slightly older and slightly more skilled at dealing with not just baseball adversity, but life adversity, and truly growing into, being a grown-up, if you will. And I'm not suggesting that he's immature or anything, but that's rarely talked about. We always talk about the physical side, and I think there's the mental component, playing the game, and then just the overall mental component, being comfortable in your shoes as somebody that's now not 17 or 18 anymore.
Yeah, and there's a lot of guys in that category that I think it's going to be really, really fun to watch. As we've talked about the Lost Boys. I've got to get your take on this. This just started on Twitter right before I came on here about the nicknames. We had been leaning toward Charlie and the Children was something that had been flown around as a kind of spiritual successor to Todd and the Toddlers, right? But also Chuck and the Lost Boys, because we've been calling them the Lost Boys. Somebody hit me up with that. We had some back and forth. Do both of those need workshop? Either one? How you feeling about? Are you Charles Cobb, Chuck Nasty on both of those?
I know you've used the Lost Boys, and I know you don't mean that with a negative connotation. Right. But
Peter Pan,
it does carry that a little bit, and I think that is unfair to some of the young guys. So I would, though I haven't thrown my own thing out there, but you're asking me to weigh in, so I will. Yeah. I would defer to Chuck and the Children, or Charlie and the Children. I think that's less demeaning, if you will, than calling them the Lost Boys, because that's suggesting they don't belong for various reasons.
Well, and which point taken, and I think you're absolutely right about that. But my follow up on that is, did you ever ask like Matt Holliday or Garrett Atkins, these like hulking dudes, like, how do you feel about being called a toddler?
Yeah, no, I'm not. I love nicknames, and I love anything that's organic. And so when, I'm not suggesting you guys are doing this, but when writers stay up all night and trying to come up with the right catchphrase or the proper nickname in their mind, they want to be first to. I remember when Pepsi Center first opened up, and I think it was Woody Page. I mean, in his first column, he wanted to be called the Can, or and I suppose that was a proper reference with it being the Pepsi Center initially. But I've never been one on we have to nickname this new group. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. It's just not how I'm wired, where I stay up at night going, hey, what should this group be called? Chuck and somebody, or Chuck Trevor and the the gang of 24 other guys.
Right. That's got to really rolls off the tongue.
Yeah, it's a little clunky. Might not be great for a headline. Yeah. But I mean, hey, the players could let us know too.
That's maybe why I shouldn't be doing it. I'm pretty clunky when I coming up.
It's a start, though. It's a start. It's at least third best so far. It's at least third. But the players,
Charlie Blackman, the tone setter.
Hey,
so
right.
That's
Patrick
bad.
was his third best out of 2 entries.
A little bit. Also ran. There's an also ran. Well, back in 2019, it didn't stick. The Cucarachas, but that was a nickname that the team, was able to rally around. And I mean, for all we know, it could be a resurgence of that. In many ways, there's a lot of carryover from those guys. And I don't know that it'll have that flair of Todd and the Toddlers and whatnot. Chuck and the Children, the Nasty Boys. Do we kind of mash them? Chuck Nasty and the Lost Boys, the Nasty Boys. We'll see what they do on the field.
But that one's been used
a couple times. We've got the Cincinnati Reds with Rob Dibble and who else? Danny Jackson, Randy Myers, and we also have Brian Knobs and Jerry Sags of WCW and WWE fame from Charlton. There you go. That's it. That was the third guy I was missing. John Franco was there for a little bit too.
Yeah.
Wow.
Hey, listen,
if I'm going to get up in arms about Todd Father,
if you're going to make WWE references, you're not going to get a great deal of participation from me. Nothing against the WWE, but I'm not up to speed.
More of an NWA kind of. Those old days.
Different league. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is actually a great question from Will, since you were talking about getting ready to go down there. He says, when you first get to Arizona, is there something you always regularly do when you get there? Maybe you go to a restaurant or a museum, a golf course, anything in particular that before even getting out to the games, you're ready to do?
It's a great question. I don't know if I have my favorite restaurants I like to go to. I have my favorite runs down there. I just, kind of soak it all up. I guess the one thing that I do every day is the Starbucks, which is right across Indian Bend Road, about a half a mile from Salt River Fields. Before I go to the complex in the morning, I stop in that Starbucks every morning after I've worked out and make my way over to Salt River Field. So that is the first, to answer his question, literally that is the first thing I do once I've, gotten all the other stuff out of the way.
There you go. Baseball, you gotta have a routine.
That you got to have that routine, and while we're talking about first going down to spring training, here we are. We're still in the first week. What do you say to someone who might be kind of looking too much at the box score early on in spring training games, or what's the takeaway most fans should have? Just taking things with a grain of salt. Are there certain things they should be looking for, or just overall just being patient here in the early going with any team in any season?
I think if an exceptionally young player or a relatively inexperienced player that has a prospect tag attached to their name and has a strong spring, that's noteworthy. But if Charlie Blackman hits 185 this spring, I don't care. If Trevor Story only hits 1 home run this spring, I don't care. If so-and-so starts and hits 450, great, had an awesome spring. and you hope there's carryover, but oftentimes not necessarily. I don't put a ton of stock in March, and I'm going to sound Shakespearean, beware the Ides of March, but beware the Ides of September as well. When it used to be when the rosters expanded, and if two teams were out of it and they were playing each other, and there's no longer pressure, the same kind of pressure to perform, and are you getting hits off a guy who was called up from AAA, and that sort of thing. So I'm always aware of what takes place in September, and I kind of, put a stop sign out saying don't read too much into what takes place. I mean, if a young player does well, great. If a young player has a really good March, I'm aware of that. If a pitcher struggled mightily in March, you go, boy, I hope they turn that around. But especially with veteran guys, I'm not honed in and focused on everything they do, because a lot of times with veteran pitchers, they are truly working on pitch or whatever, just getting the proverbial work in to get themselves their pitch count and their arm ready for the lengthy major league season.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. You don't put a lot of stock in it because, as you said, you've got guys going up to the plate facing pitchers who are working on stuff. So it's more that the opposing pitcher gave up the hit or home run or meatball right over the middle of the plate more than the player earned it. And you also have got this element too, and we kind of see it in today's game where you go, well, who's the better team, the Mariners or the Rockies? Because they keep coming back. Well, there aren't really very many Mariners players and Rockies players still left in the game. You've got those late substitutions coming in. You got
Blank
AA guys.
scored that run though. You got to hand it to Blank on the.
Blank is having a good spring, but it's AA guys against AA guys in a major league spring training facility, and you have to take that with a grain of salt. And so the numbers can certainly lie to you at that point, depending on the strength of the opponent ultimately for these players.
Yeah, every announcer group has fun late in spring training games when number 87 is throwing to number 91, and neither guy is on the roster, even the expanded roster that you were handed before the ball game. And the only people who know outside their locker mates is mom and dad looking in, and you don't want to screw it up for mom and dad, but you have to apologize because you literally have no idea who they brought up from minor league camp potentially that day and gets in at bat in the 8th inning, that sort of thing. I'll throw something else out there, guys, that you're aware of, having covered the Rockies and the sport for a while, and that is historically the Cactus League gives up some robust offensive numbers, more so than the Grapefruit League. The travel is a little more onerous in the Grapefruit League. The weather, it's not the dry heat, it's the it's the wet heat, if you will, the humidity. So the numbers in offensively typically are far stronger in the Cactus League, and you'll see guys go off and they hit 7-8 home runs and they batted .425. Great, awesome. I'd rather do that as I get ready for the 1st of April than have hit $120. But I keep it with a grain of salt.
If I'm hearing you both right, what you're suggesting is don't go immediately to the DraftKings Sportsbook based on the results going on in the beginning of March here, end of February. Maybe don't lay down big dollar amounts unless maybe, like you said, you see that prospect you think is about to hit. Then maybe lay a couple of bucks on him to win a random award that you might think he can. It can pay out huge. If you want to go with safer stuff, now's the time to start looking at that, but don't base it on spring training results. Definitely base it on deeper research and knowledge than that. What you don't need deeper research and knowledge about, though, if you're a new user and you use the promo code DNVR to get the DraftKings Sportsbook app on your phone right now, you can get $1 turned into $100, whether you know anything about UFC in this weekend's action or not. 259, 3 title fights, and if in the main event one of the fighters lands a punch, well, you just turned $1 into $100. That's a great deal. That's an unbeatable deal. DraftKings is always throwing promos like that at you. So make sure you download the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code DNVR when you sign up to turn $1 into $100 if either main event fighter lands a punch on Saturday. Place your bet and watch the fist fly this weekend using code DNVR to turn $1 into $100 for a limited time only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Must be 21 or older, Colorado only, new customers only. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. And if you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-522-4700.
I want to throw something else out there. And Patrick, great job again with DraftKings. Or excuse me, Drew, great job with DraftKings.
I coached him up, though. I coached him up.
It's
true. Coaching him up. Right.
That's right.
Yeah, that was my right. But
love it.
Spring training is important to everyone, but to certain individuals. And earlier we were talking about Brendan Rodgers had a big day. These are important days and games for Brendan Rodgers. He's not an established big leaguer. He wants to not only establish himself, but he needs to go win a job. That's a different deal than Charlie Blackmon getting ready for the season, Trevor Story, who will play on Friday for the first time, getting ready for the season. They're not trying to win a job. They're doing what they've done in the past to get their body ready, to get the requisite number of at-bats so they feel comfortable when they dial it up for real on April 1st on that Thursday at Coors Field against the Dodgers. But for Brendan Rodgers, different situation. And even to a certain degree, or really to a large degree, for Hampson and Hilliard battling in center field, for a starting spot and how that outfield is going to shake out. Those are the every game and every moment on the field is important and different for those folks than it is for the veterans.
And if you're not convinced that Brendan Rodgers is battling someone for second base, Garrett Hampson's there, Chris Owens, they're all going to be fighting for playing time. And you say, well, Rodgers is probably going to be the guy. He just has to play well enough. Well, you need to keep an eye on how well that is, because, is he just going to be a guy that's in the lineup batting 6th or 7th? Or is he going to be a guy that's going to be hitting second just ahead of Trevor Story and behind Raimel Tapia most likely? And you go, wow, okay, now we really could see this kid break out in a major way. So it's little nuanced things like that can also give you an idea of how good of a season a player is going to have.
I know the line about making assumptions with the first 3 letters of that word. They can make, which I'm perfectly capable of doing. I would get this a guess. I haven't talked to Buddy about this yet, and I will. But I would guess that he is going to run with Brendan Rodgers and give Brendan Rodgers every opportunity to succeed. Not saying that other guys aren't going to get a spot start, and if he's 0 for 38, that he's not going to sit down and watch a little bit, or maybe in that situation he'd be sent out. And hopefully that we don't see that. But I want to reference something Jim Tracy did with a young Carlos Gonzalez, who, when he was coming up in the Arizona organization, was the top prospect for Arizona and one of the top prospects in baseball. Big trade, the Dan Herron deal. He ends up in Oakland. He gets his feet wet in Oakland, has a couple moments, but he struggled. But he was still this big-time prospect when he was the headliner in the Matt Holliday deal. And he started slowly, if you guys remember, with the Rockies. And Jim Tracy, almost on a daily basis, was asked about, Cargo and his struggles. You're going to keep him in the lineup. And his response, and he talked about this quite a bit in the book I did 2 years ago, that he was going to run Cargo out there every single day till he figured it out, because he was too talented not to, and he wanted to show him confidence, even if the average when he walked up to home plate on the huge jumbotron, Rockies Vision suggested that he probably should be at the time in Colorado Springs. He said, I'm playing this guy. He's going to figure it out. And obviously we know what happened. He certainly figured it out and became one of the game's top players for a significant period of time. I hope that same philosophy applies this year to Brendan Rodgers. You got to allow him to figure it out. You're going to have to allow him to struggle, and just know your name most often is going to be in that lineup. And kid, go see what you have, because he was drafted too high. The Rockies have too much money invested in him, to put him on the yo-yo at this stage of his career, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's one of the benefits to this roster right now, and expectations being, maybe lower than they should be, maybe not. But you're right. Rodgers is going to have that opportunity to establish himself in a major way, and we know that's going to be the case for Ryan McMahon, who's kind of went in and out of the lineup a little bit in the last couple seasons, especially after his kind of breakout performance in 2019. Tapia will kind of be able to settle in to that left field job. We'll see if he's capable of winning a batting title, as you mentioned, with Sam Hilliard and Garrett Hampson kind of rotating out there all over the outfield. That's one of the positives, is that while, this current roster as it stands might not win a World Series this year, there's a good majority of those players that going forward could be a part of that next run, because they're just that young and just that unproven. And with that, just that hungry to establish themselves in their MLB careers.
That has to be a must. I mean, if the Rockies are to contend, in the near future with some of the changes that have been made, they need some good with this. I don't want to call them a super young group, because they're not super young. You got guys in their mid-20s, but they're going to have to be some good story with the Hampson, Hilliards, the McMahons, the Brendan Rodgers, even the Josh Fuentes. I'll throw him in that group. And can a couple of them truly emerge as impactful big leaguers, and maybe a couple of the other ones be solid everyday guys on a contending team, an upper division team? I think it's always important to point that out. There are guys that play in the big leagues, and my dad told me this when I was a kid. I'll tell you where the story emanates from very quickly. I was probably 5 years old, and it was one of my first memories of being at a big league game. I was a New York Mets fan. I was at Chase Stadium growing up, and they were playing the San Francisco Giants, and I knew I was a Mets fan, and they're announcing the starting lineup, and they're saying for San Francisco, leading off and playing second base, Tito Fuentes, and my voice, I go boo, because I knew I was a Mets fan. And they got to the 3-hole hitter, and they said in center field, batting third, number 24, Willie Mays. And I said, boo. My dad grabbed my arm, and he said, first of all, you never boo a big leaguer, because the worst big leaguer is a great player. And secondly, and most importantly, you never boo that man, because he may be the greatest player of all time. So the point of that story, I learned that early on. I've always been bothered when people boo. Yeah, if a guy strikes out in a key situation, you know what? You may have been unhappy. Your family may be unhappy. All your buddies watching the game with you may be unhappy. But you're not as unhappy as the guy who punched out. The only time I could ever imagine booing is on the rare occasion that, and it's you almost never see this really, is where guys just don't give effort. And I can understand that. But because a guy struck out or a guy walked somebody and the bases were loaded, the last guy on God's green earth who wanted to strike out or walk somebody was the guy that did that. So I'm always reminded, of that story with my dad when I was young. But anyhow, got off on it.
Yeah. No, those are the kinds of stories that we want to hear.
We're never going to shut down a Willie Mays story. That's for sure.
I know, right? That's just not going to happen here. If you do want to reset, as you've done before, I think we'll get a re-clear on that connection, and I can do a quick ad read.
Yeah.
Just getting a little bit of a tough static there, but as we've done before, we've been able to fix that issue. No issues, by the way, with Hassel Cattle Company.
Oh,
Wagyu
man.
beef. no issues.
Can we end this episode early so I can go have some
just go
Hassel
and get
Cattle
some.
Company?
I
I'm
know,
getting
right?
hungry. I
We
want
got
some of their steak right now.
all kinds of delicious stuff: steaks, burgers, ground beef, ground chuck, the bacon. Again, I have had 100% positive reviews from people on the Wagyu beef from Hassel Cattle Company. It's fantastic. It really doesn't break your bank, even if you want to go for some of the fancier stuff. If you want to be like me, shop a little bit more frugally, take advantage of all the promo deals they throw at you, but then you can still start stacking them up. Get yourself over $200. You'll get free shipping. And if you use promo code DNVR10, you'll get 10% off. And again, no hormones, antibiotics, taking care of the animals, taking care of your body, taking care of you. And I cannot recommend it highly enough. Hassel Cattle Company, that's HASSELL cattlecompany.com. And also,
when are we going to get some sweatshirts and t-shirts?
I
Like,
know,
I
right?
honestly, their logo is cool, but just to rock that red, and people go, what are you wearing? I'm like, well, let me tell you a little bit about it.
Tell you a story.
Do an ad read, one person at a time, as they ask me where I got my cool shirt from.
Can I tell you where I got my beef? Is that how you start most of your conversations?
Good majority for sure.
All right. Looks like we got Drew Goodman back.
What's up, fellas?
Excellent.
Hey, long
Fantastic.
time no see.
Yeah, right?
Your rating skyrocketed the last 45 seconds.
That's right. It's all downhill from here. Speaking of ratings, everyone has got to download the Drew Goodman podcast. You got to be subscribed to that. You got to go and listen. You're missing out on all kinds of fantastic interviews from players like Dante Bichette to some all-time fan favorites. Tell us about we got a two-parter in the midst of, so we can plug this a little bit, because one of everybody's favorite people in this whole Rockies wide community that exists.
No question about it. Jenny Kavnar, who I've known for now a long time. I knew her when she was in San Diego, and I've known her dad for a long time. Was a terrific coach at Smoky Hill and Regis, won a couple state titles, one at each school, and Doe, her mom, great family, great Colorado family, great baseball family. And Jenny, everybody knows Jenny. Everybody adores Jenny, as they should. And so Jenny jumps on, and we talk about, we'll get to the Rockies in part one. I think you guys had an opportunity to listen. We talked about the broadcasting industry being a woman in what has always been a male-dominated industry, and how she's not only climbed the ladder in some of the more traditional spots where we'd seen women in sports, but now there's so many glass ceilings that have been broken. And Jenny, is doing play-by-play, and she's going up and doing the Big Sky tournament for the third straight year coming up next week. She fills in for me when I take some time off. So we talk about that, and we have some fun, because Jenny, as I think you guys know, is due in about a month with her second child. So exciting times for the Kavnar / Spurgeon family. But she's always a lot of fun to visit with, and I think you'll enjoy that.
Yeah, it was a perfect episode to start off Women's History Month. And, in the episode, I won't get too deep and spoil it, but I loved hearing Jenny talk about the women that inspired her, from this area and nationally, and how, at that time, 15, 20 years ago, whatever it may have been, just saying, hey, you'd be good at that. You should do that. And man, that was really an uphill battle, and it still is. But it was just fantastic hearing about, Jenny's journey and the people that kind of paved the way for her to be a woman in sports.
Yeah, and there's so many very, very talented women out there, and one of my favorites is Doris Burke, who does a great job in basketball, and she's somebody that has been a pioneer also. But we talk quite a bit about subject and some of the other women, not just in broadcasting, that have taken on roles in sports that were just, I don't even say exclusively positions occupied by men in the past, and we're seeing some coaches now in the NFL that are women, and so it's been a great ride for Jenny, and she's done so many great things, and we're really fortunate. I'm biased naturally, but I love our team. We have so many talented people that work behind the scenes, from producers and directors and tape operators and camera operators. I always say this area is loaded with talented people because everybody wants to live in Colorado, and so we've been able to take advantage of it in formulating our team. But the folks that you are all familiar with, the Rockies fans, from Splee and Huey and Corey and Mark Stout, Jenny, of course. I feel really privileged to have that kind of group that I get to go to work with every day.
Yeah, and I will say, and I'm not naming any names, but I know some of those camera operators can throw back Breck brews with the best of them. And I was keeping up. I'm not saying I'm not like snitching on anybody. We were all in a part of this situation. Is all I'm saying. Some of those, I love hanging out with some of the guys on the team after some of the games. Again, I didn't say anybody's name.
I'll point out some names. We have a good group, man. We have a fun group.
Yeah,
I know some guys that can throw them back. I'm not competing with them anymore. That's for darn sure.
Right. Totally.
I love the there's a theme in this episode too, talking about Jenny that I don't know if it was intentional or not. Obviously, 13-time Colorado Sportscaster of the Year, probably was, but there is a through line of family throughout this most recent edition of the Drew Goodman podcast, where, as you said, you're just in St. Louis to see your son play at Webster University, and Jenny's talking about motherhood and her son Vin, and kind of communicating a big moment in a fan's life. Hey, your guy Nolan Arenado just got traded. How do you communicate that, and how you had to do that too as a father? And so I think that was a really cool overarching theme for anyone in the Colorado area who knows you, who knows Jenny, and has just watched sports with their family. Like, you got to go and listen to this one. This one's great, and it's only part one, which I'm really waiting with bated breath for part two.
Yeah. Every once in a while, and I got you guys, I don't know how you do it. You guys do such a great job cranking it out every day. And it's not, for those that listen in and are religious, viewers / listeners of your guys' podcast, it's not easy to come up with content every day, especially because your subject matter is pretty finite. I mean, I'll dabble into, what's going on with the Avalanche. I talk college baseball a little bit this week. I'll talk a little, football and college football, but you guys are focused, day in and day out on the Rockies and baseball as a whole, and to crank that out on a daily basis, and to be compelling like you guys are, I tip my cap to you. I get a week to try to put stuff together, and sometimes I'm scratching my head. But it was fun to visit with Jenny, and every once in a while, when you have such a hopefully a compelling and fascinating person that you're talking to, sometimes it's worthy of doing a two-parter.
Yeah.
And so that's what ended up happening with Jenny.
Yeah. Yep. Absolute must listen to.
That we're talking about this because I just noticed on Twitter that she just favorited our teams of the podcast on Twitter. So
there we go.
Maybe she's listening right now to you guys also.
Yeah, right. You never know. You never know when Jenny's listening. So
yeah, we lucked out a little bit with spring training, as you said, doing a daily podcast, talking about one finite subject like that. We got saved by the spring training games. We have real baseball to talk about. Otherwise, we were workshopping an idea of best Rockies mascots, and it was probably going to be a short episode, I'm thinking.
I don't know. Top one Rockies mascots of all time.
Not sure how much we would have been able to juice that bad boy for, but nevertheless, we've got games now, and is there anybody so far when you go down there? Are there any players that it's their first spring training, let's say, or maybe it's their second? You only got an abbreviated look. Is there anyone right now that you're excited and looking forward to see next week, or certain storylines that you're most excited to get an up close and personal look at?
I always like to focus in on the pitchers because we know that this sport, if you're going to be any good, you have to. I think the Rockies have a chance to be better than many of the folks out there think they will be, because they have a solid rotation. Knock on wood, everybody can stay healthy. They have a little more depth than they've had. They're certainly not anywhere near where the Dodgers are. We understand that. But to answer your question more specifically, I'm looking forward to seeing the 20-year-old. I believe Helcris Olivares. I know it's Olivares,
okay.
A lefty who throws very hard. He had a nice debut a couple of days ago. Ryan Rollison, who was a number one a few years ago. I want to see how he has progressed. Didn't really get to put our eyes on him last year because of COVID. Those two guys are at the very top of my list to watch. I want to see. I've seen Robert Stevenson when he pitched for the Reds. I want to see what that looks like. He's got a big arm. I think the Rockies have a chance to be better in the bullpen. So those are a few names. And of course, the aforementioned Brendan Rodgers, what the at-bats look like, how he moves at second base, how comfortable he is over there on the right side. And just also, talking to coaches who, Stu Cole, who's been working with him every day, and talking to Dave Maggott and getting some of their observations on work habits and drills that happen away from the games at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So those are a few names that I'll be kind of focused in on next week and be able to pass along to you guys what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing.
That's going to be great. One of the stories that I'm really interested in.
You know what?
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to mention one more name, Ben Bowden. Is another guy that
yes,
we all need to see, right?
Yes. And he had. I think he pitched a clean inning today. I'd have to go back and look. I think he pitched a clean one. So, very, very intrigued in that. I asked Bud Black this morning about speed, and this is something Patrick and I have talked a lot about too. Not only do the Rockies have the personnel, they've got a lot of guys on the team who can run, but they've also got. I think that's an opportunity where when pitching and defense are kind of your calling card, where you can almost kind of literally start to steal some games and really become that pest team. Is that something you'd like to see the Rockies do, that you think they can find some success in, that kind of style of play?
I think it's harder to run than ever before. First of all, it's not the 80s where, the Royals and the Cardinals built their team around speed on the lineup, and you could get a lot of bags. Pitchers do a much better job of holding runners, I think, in terms of varying their times to the plate. It's hard to run. Having said that, though, I'm in agreement with you, Drew, in that Rockies have to create more offense. They have not slugged the last couple of years. By advanced metrics, they've not been a good offensive club. There's been too much swing and miss. So they need to mitigate the swing and miss, number one. But from the speed standpoint, the Hampsons, even the Hilliards, the Stories, he wants to be a 30-30 guy. They're going to have to pick their spots to run, even deficit running sometimes. And what I mean by that is, it used to be if you were down 2 or 3 runs, that shut down the running game. You didn't run that because you don't want to run into an out on the base pass. You may have to, because the Rockies, at least as they're projected right now, hopefully this changes, you're not going to have the 3-run home run up and down that lineup on a nightly basis.
Right.
And with the change in the baseball too, I mean, there's going to be a lot of teams that, would normally rely on that 3-run home run aren't going to be able to. So that run production, just putting the ball in play and have those guys run the bases is going to be even more of an element of that style this season with the new baseball. So it's something we have to keep our eye on. Not a lot of home runs so far in the early part of spring, but again, those are all things that we got to take with a grain of salt. So I'll be excited to see if they do run more, because you're right, that could be an excellent element of surprise to a degree.
Yeah, and Tapia, I didn't mention Tapia. I mean, Raimel Tapia has good speed. Now, there's a lot of guys who have good speed that aren't good base stealers, and there's some guys that don't have great speed but are outstanding base stealers. Remember Paul Goldschmidt? What do you get, 26, 28 bags a couple of years ago?
Yeah.
Matt Holliday, big man who could steal some bases. So it doesn't have to be just the guy who's a blur. But the Rockies do have some athletic guys. Chris Owings, when he's in the lineup, is an outstanding athlete. They have guys that can get bases.
And let's not forget Charlie Blackmon, right? 43 stolen bases a few years ago. So, I mean, I don't know that if he wants that to continue to be a facet of his game.
He'll get a couple.
But hey, yeah, he can
Charlie's
kick a bag.
days of running are done.
I mean, what do you think?
If you need it.
Under 3.5 on the DraftKings Sportsbook, what would he be at? What do we think?
3.5? I'll take the over on that.
3.5. I mean, he's going to get 5 or 6 stolen bases just because he's smart, right? Like he just
Yeah, he only had 2 the last 2 seasons.
I will take. Yeah, that's a heck of a line. I don't know, man. I'll take the over. I'll say he gets 4 bags.
4 bags.
Listen, he's become he's a power hitter, and he wants to protect his legs. And the last thing you want Charlie is grabbing his hamstring, try to steal a bag. So I think he'll utilize his speed going first to third more so than trying to swipe a bag.
Yeah,
that's what we've seen the last couple of years, anyhow.
Probably wise. It's probably the smart route to go. All right. We good. I think we should probably wrap it up there. There's a lot more to talk about, obviously, but there's going to continue to be. It's early in spring training yet. There's going to be more storylines going forward. Anything that we could be talking about right now might not be a thing a week from now, but as you said, the next time we chat with you, you'll have gotten your eyes on everyone. So we're very excited for that.
And there'll be 2 AT&T Sportsnet games broadcast on Wednesday and Thursday of next week.
That's right. Yeah. Our first 2 of the season will be on Wednesday and Thursday. So I'm looking forward to it. And we'll do 4 over the next, between the 10th and the 15th, we'll do 4 ball games. So folks will get a great opportunity to see things as kind of midway in spring training, and then we'll have a couple more late in spring training before everything gets going on April 1st.
And this is Goody's spring training too. Huey's, they're all shaking the cobwebs off, right? I don't know how you're getting your reps in if you're watching spring training games, just sitting on the couch, you're talking to yourself, but you're shaking the cobwebs out as well.
Yeah, there's no question about that. You're trying to find your rhythm again, your baseball rhythm. You don't want to blow out all your good stories in March. You don't see all those. But as I said, I can't wait to get down there and get in the booth again.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for listening into this episode of the podcast. Make sure you're joining us for the live edition of the show on YouTube. You got to subscribe on YouTube so you don't miss any of the visual stuff. You get preference in having your questions and comments answered and read on the show. We see you there. Like and subscribe. Hit that bell icon. It'll let you know when we're going live. All that good stuff on the YouTube. Head over there for really all the beats. That's where it's going on. Make sure you're subscribed to the DNVR.com so you don't miss out on any of that written content. Plus, you get discounts on hats and shirts and masks, a bigger beer when you come down to the DNVR bar, and you get access to our private Discord chat. You got to follow everyone on social media. And again, you got to make sure you're subscribed to the Drew Goodman podcast. It is must-listen stuff for any hardcore Colorado Rockies fan. So thank you all for continuing to be absolutely awesome out there. I promise you that we will continue to be absolutely Patrick Lyons and Drews Goodman and Creasman in here. And until next time, we will see you at the ballpark.